Hello, and welcome to another edition of For the Love of Creatives podcast. I am Connections and Community Guy Dwight, and I'm joined by our other Connections and Community Guy and host, Maddox. And today we are joined by our featured guest, Eric Breish. Welcome, Eric.
Hey guys, how are you doing? Thanks for having me.
We've
Great.
really been looking forward to this, Eric. We just
Yes.
we after that brief conversation with you several months ago, we know that you have probably some incredible stories to tell, and I know that we're excited. So I know it's going to be good for the listeners as well.
Yeah, I know we've been trying to get this together for some time, so it's nice to finally connect.
Very much so.
Now, we met at a gallery here in town where you happen to be one of the artists at the Deborah Ferrari Gallery, or the Ferrari Gallery.
Yeah,
And I have to say that there's definitely an experience of your work. I have seen a lot of your work online subsequently, and it cannot be captured. It is a sensory experience. And I will just say that as one of those poor tortured souls who in the early 90s got to see all of the people looking through that three-dimensional art and seeing things, and I never saw anything.
Mhm.
There is something special about the things that you produce because I feel like I'm having my turn because I am having like a full body experience when I get to see some of your pieces.
Yeah, that guitar that night at the opening, that guitar that you showed us was just we have talked about it many times in groups of people. We got to tell you what we saw, and we describe it. Of course, the description can do absolutely no justice whatsoever, but yeah, that
What?
incredible
Yeah,
piece.
I appreciate that. And you guys are like some of the first people to see that guitar. That was the first time that I've actually showed that in public. So, we've worked on that project for about 6 or 7 years, and it took us a long time to get to the point where we were actually ready to let that out into the public. And we've gotten some really, really great feedback. And it's just one of those types of projects. So there's nothing else like it in the world. And it's been really fun to see people's reactions on not only seeing the work, but then also realizing that it's an actual playable instrument. And when you take it off the panel and you put it in somebody's hands, especially like a musician, it tends to blow them away. So it's been really fun. And the type of metal work that I do and that kind of three-dimensional experience that you were talking about is so hard to describe to people or to show on videos or to show in pictures. And so that's always been one of my biggest challenges in art, is trying to get people to understand what it is that I do, because we've kind of moved into this very digital society where everybody views things on social media or on computers and all of that. So that's been really challenging for me, and it's really cool to get people in front of the work and get to experience it and see them actually have that true experience that I'm trying to get them to have. And when they finally get it and see it, then it's like the aha moment. And so yeah, it was really cool to have you guys there for that.
Yeah, it was a treat. We felt very honored that we were the first to get to see that. And I took some photos and I think a video, and although they were cool, they didn't even begin to really show the true nature of the piece and what it looks like with real eyes rather than artificial, camera lenses.
Yeah. Yeah, the camera has
Yeah.
one eye. That's like the problem that we found, is that since the camera has one eye, it's not able to tell depth and dimension like our two eyes do, right? And so that experience, until we can figure out a way to kind of replicate how our eyes work and how our sensory perceptions work, then it's going to be a challenge to kind of present that in a way that makes sense online.
There's bound to be
Yeah.
a way to do that, I suspect, because I've heard of people using multiple cameras and then stacking images to give it that dimensional look. Uh,
Yeah,
there's
I have a
somebody
lot
out there that could figure that out for sure.
I have a lot of friends, in fact, I just had this experience yesterday, a guy that, he's a filmmaker. He's been in Hollywood and all of this. And I have several friends that are very, very, they do a lot of music videos. They shoot for television and all of that. And they always come in and they say, I've got this idea. I know how to do it. And we spend the next few hours going through it. And it's like, and then they always end and they're like, that's a lot harder than I thought. And you guys just interviewed somebody, Matthew, in Dallas,
Osborne.
Osborne, and he did the same thing at an opening. He's like, oh, I got it. I know how to capture this and edit it and all that. And he came back to me a few weeks later and he's like, hey, I can't quite do it.
Right.
So I'm like, I know, I get it.
It's definitely a code to be cracked for sure. Hey,
Well,
before we go any further, Eric, we know a little bit about you, but why don't you give our listeners just a little bit of an overview about who you are and what you do before we jump into the big questions?
Yeah, sure. I don't know how far back that you want to go, but a brief kind of, I guess, biography is I grew up in basically Texas, Oklahoma. I graduated high school out of Houston. At 18, I went into the Marine Corps, and I was an active duty Marine for 4 years out in California. Did that 4-year stint, got out, I worked a little bit in IT, which is kind of what I did in the Marine Corps, and then ended up going to school in Florida. And I went to a school that focused on music and entertainment, and all of these things that are involved in, like, the entertainment industry, whether it be web design or filmmaking or music. And so I did that. And once I graduated there and I got a degree in music recording, basically, audio engineering. And so when I graduated, it was a really interesting time because all of the home recording was starting to happen. And when that thing exploded, then it just basically kind of killed that industry, meaning that all of the big studios, it shrunk down to really big studios, and you only have so many engineers that are in there. So it just became this industry that was really, really, I guess, saturated, if you will. And so I started doing home recordings, and I really loved doing that. Love music. I think that's why I became an artist, ultimately. And so I realized that saturation, and I went back to that school and I got a degree in entertainment business. And that opened my eyes a little bit more to, I guess, if you want to call it the money side of things and how to survive as a creative. And that's where that seed got planted on. That's really what I wanted to do. So graduated from that program, and then went back to California, I joined this company. It was very small. It was like 2 or 3 people. And it was a company that designed clothing for surf and skate brands, Volcom, Billabong, Quicksilver. And I did that. And during that process, discovered, because I was on the design side half the time, half design, half logistics. And it gave me kind of this creative streak into the visual side of things, because we were doing t-shirts and hats and all of that. And I thought, oh man, I really love putting together things that are visual. And I never really had that experience before. And when I paired that with music, it was like, oh, I can listen to music and be inspired by that and create this thing while I'm doing that. So it was like this mixture, and it was an aha moment. And I thought, I don't know how I'm gonna, like, capitalize on that. And, where can I bring that to? What can I do that with? And so I think over time that seed was planted, and I started to try to think, how I could do those things. In the meantime, I moved back to Texas and roomed with one of my friends, and got a real job, got back into the corporate world, and started, supporting myself and making money. And one night I had a dream that I had painted this painting, and I still can kind of like see it in my mind. And that was 2006. And I woke up, and I told my roommate about it. And he said, well, I took a class in painting a long time ago in school, and I still have a toolbox in the garage, and it has all these paintbrushes and paints in there. So you can have that if you want it. And I went to Hobby Lobby after work that night, and I bought a canvas, and I brought it home and I propped it up against the wall. And I took his toolbox and I opened it up, and it had all these brushes, and they were hard, and he had all these different paints, and some of them were different viscosities, and you know, they had different, like one was oil and one was acrylic, and I had no idea what the difference was, right? So I was just kind of trying different things and using different things, and I realized very quickly oil and acrylics are very different, right? So so I messed around a little bit. I ended up painting my first painting, and just kind of sat back and just thought about the process and like how that made me feel. And I showed it to my roommate, and he was like, "That's not bad. You know, it's really not bad." And it was a picture of a flower, which is really funny because I don't do anything figurative. And so I painted this picture, and you know, I just really enjoyed this process of, it was very therapeutic. And so I just started like grabbing things, paper and everything else, and I started, you know, making pictures and doing this thing, and I would show people. And so it was just a doorway to kind of to open myself up and somehow bring in this creativity that I was looking for, because I had gotten out of music. I was in this corporate, setting, and I didn't know exactly how I could release that. And so painting for me was kind of the door that opened. And I did that for about a year or two, and I lived in San Antonio at the time. And then I moved to Houston because I got a job transfer. And that kind of brought me into the Houston art scene. And it was in a really big way, and really big galleries and really big artists. And that's where I met my mentor, whose name is Andreas Nottebohm. He's from Germany. And he's a really well-known artist around the world in museums and all of that. And, you know, to make a long story short, he kind of like brought me under his wing. There's a whole story that goes into it. I've explained it on maybe a podcast before, like in writing. I wrote him a letter. The letter hit him at the right time. He got a bunch of letters before, from all people all around the world, and it just hit him at the right time. We ended up meeting before a show in Houston. We had dinner, and we just became fast friends. And from that point on, I started visiting him in California, and you know, he just kind of slowly took me under his wing, and he had never shown anybody in 50 years what he did. He didn't allow people in his studio. So I would just visit, and I would help him with things. I would wash panels, and I would clean things off and organize things, or anything that he asked me to do. And I would sit in the back in this dark room, because that's how we work. And I would watch him work for hours and hours and hours in all different capacities. And it was such an eye-opening experience to me, the process of a real master making work. And it was so it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And I was getting such an education around that, but not only in the creation of art, but he's twice my age. So he's 81 now. And at the time he was in his 60s, and he had never had a real job before. He graduated from high school and he became an artist, and that's all he's ever done. So I'd never met anybody like that before. And he, kind of gave me permission in all these different ways to let go of a lot of the programming that I've had growing up, because I came from a pretty structured environment. And I didn't really know what it meant to be an artist. And that was an education for me, not only how to take a medium and make something out of it, but also to live as an artist, and to, what does that mean? You don't have to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go to work and do this thing. And it was like, he lived in such a free and bohemian way that when I got back to my real life, I was like, oh no, I don't know. I don't know if I can continue on with this anymore. Because I've seen the light, and it's really how I want to live. And so when I broke that to my family, and I was actually married at the time, and I broke that to my wife, and she was like, "What are you talking about? You've got this great job, you make plenty of money, and you've got everything security wise that you need, and it's like, what do you mean that you want to become a full-time artist?" And a lot of people just didn't understand that. So that for me was a real fork in the road on how I was going to live the rest of my life. And it took me, from that time, about 2008 was when that was happening, all the way until 2015, at the end of 2015, when I finally was able to pull the trigger, because I would go to work from 6 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. And then I would come home and I would get in the studio. And that's what my routine was for about 7 or 8 years. I wouldn't go out on the weekends and, do all these things that young people were doing. And I was like in there kind of like honing my craft and figuring it out and really working towards something. And I was having some group shows, and I was going to a lot of openings, and just really immersing myself in the artist's life after I got off of work. So that balance was really tough for a long time. And I finally got to a point where, my work was good enough to where it was in a gallery and it was selling. And then I just finally, through, some encouragement of the person that I was with at the time, that just said, this is the hard stop date. This is when you're going to quit your job. And I fought it all the way up until literally like the last second, when I knew that I was going to quit that day. And I was telling myself, oh, don't do it. It's too risky. And I had a meeting and it didn't go very well. And I walked out of that meeting. It was like, I'm done. I'm going to walk in there and quit. And so I did. And that for me was like jumping off the cliff and learning how to fly on the way down. And I just really haven't looked back ever since then. And that has been almost 10 years now, that, and I've learned a lot of things along the way, and that you can't really know in the beginning, right? Like if you knew those things, you would never probably jump. You just kind of had to do it. And so, yeah, I've had a really interesting life between military and corporate and all of these different scenarios that led me to art. And then now, doing it for almost 10 years. So it's been a real wild ride.
That's amazing. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. I think that we were enlisted at about the same time.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I was in the Army from 98 to 2002.
Yeah, exactly. Almost, yeah, 97 to 2001. So yeah, very close. That's crazy.
I'm curious, how did those early experiences, when you were in the Marine Corps, um, what have you brought of that with you as you've progressed and transitioned into being a full-time artist?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. And I wasn't your average, like, a lot of people go into the military, they really adopt that lifestyle, and they're very, I guess they kind of become that. And I didn't really, it didn't really happen for me. I was always kind of eccentric and on the edge and all of this. I was a sergeant at the time. I had other Marines under me, and so I played the game well, if you will. But I always had this side to me that was kind of rebellious, um, and I knew that I didn't quite fit in. I knew that I wasn't going to go on beyond 4 years. It was like, this is a great experience, but it's not who I am. But it did, what it did was, when I graduated as a young man from high school and went into this, I needed this discipline. I needed this, this foundation that was going to kind of like make me mature quickly and gain some skills in life that I needed in order to like survive. So I went through all of that. I had a great time. I met some of my best friends, and I never, I never regret going through that service. And I still carry to this day, you get a lot of foundational things in your personality that you keep with you. And I still use those to this day. And I always look back and it's like, that's the hardest thing that I've ever gone through, physically and maybe even, I guess maybe emotionally. I don't know. I've been through some things, but that was at such a young age, that was a real pivotal part for me to grow up, and it shaped me in a way. So I do carry that with me, and I think it's discipline, and I think it's, perseverance and all of these things that the military puts into you that make you almost not shy away from any type of experience that's going to be difficult or challenging to overcome. And I'm really fortunate that I went through that, because it gave me a pretty strong resolve.
It's
Eric,
beautiful.
you mentioned the word rebellious, and I think that's an interesting word. What came up for me a few moments earlier was the word defiant,
Mhm.
but just realizing that society, in order to step away from the social mores, the belief that it's not a real job, the belief that, you can't do that full time, how will you ever make a living, all the stuff that we get hit with from everybody around us, family, friends, coworkers, you name it. You really do, in order to do what you've done, to pull away from it all and go full time as an artist, you have to be rebellious. You have to be defiant. You have to and be courageous.
Yeah. And you don't really get that kind of education, right? Especially if you go to, I didn't go to art school, but I know I have tons of friends that have MFAs and all that, and they go through school and they learn how to paint, but the schools don't teach you how to be an artist, and they don't teach you how to deal with family, and they don't teach you how to deal with all of these things. So the only way through that is to jump and go fully into it. And you can't really listen to anybody, because everyone is going to tell you that it's not the right path, or it's not the way to go, or it's too risky and you're not going to be able to support yourself. And I think I would be doing a disservice if I said, anybody can do it, and go off and quit your job. And I'm not going to say that, because there are inherent risks to it. And it's there's a reason why they say starving artists. There's a reason why they show people in, I watched Basquiat the other night, and you realize how hard his life was, even when he was one of the most prolific artists on the planet. Even during his lifetime, he was starting to get such huge recognition, but you saw how hard it was to make it and to be that. And so I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge how difficult it is. But if you really have that fire in you, and you really want to do this thing, and you want to experience the artist's life, then you can't really pay attention to what people say. And you can't also pay attention to what your fears are, because the fears are always going to get in your way, and they're always going to keep you from really stepping into that role and be willing and open to experiencing the lows and the highs. Because even if even after 10 years of being a full-time artist, I experience both of those on a daily basis every single day. And you can go through that full range. You can have this great year of building a body of work, and then have the opening, and it can be successful, and then the next day you get back to your studio and you're like, oh no, now I got to start all over again. What am I going to do? What do I have to say now? Maybe that was just a flash in the pan type of thing. So um, the full range of emotions that you go through every single day as an artist is just something that you have to accept. And people that are not in this type of position, or have not gone through this, can't really understand that. So you can't really listen to what they're saying if they haven't been through it. Um, it's just a difficult path, and you've got to be willing to walk that path.
Have you
Yeah.
ever had a moment when you almost gave up?
Oh, I mean, there's been so many moments where you question it. And I laugh, because it's like all the friends that I talk to that are artists, we were just having this discussion the other day. The amount of times that we go through that emotion and say to ourselves, like, I'm done. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Or you get frustrated because of materials, or this thing doesn't work out, or you've been waiting so long for this, sale or commission to come through. It's like you're met with so many obstacles on a daily basis that it just becomes part of this, I don't know, part of your personality, or experience through the full range of being an artist, that you have to have this thing that, I don't know, kind of counterbalances the highs, right? Because if you don't have those moments, and you're not questioning that and just going through it, I don't think that you're making a lot of interesting things. You know what I mean? If you're not having that adversity, if you're not having that pushback, um,
I,
it's not
I
a,
think this is a really important part of the conversation. I asked that question because
yeah.
so often we're siloed in our creativity, and we don't realize that there are others out there that are experiencing almost giving up, or I'm like you said, shit, I'm done with this. So it's just, it's, it's that moment when people realize, oh my God, I'm not alone. Everybody experiences that. And that's really a valuable and important moment.
And it's everybody, right? I don't think it's limited to the person that's just starting or the Mark Bradfords of the world or what. Everybody at every single level has that experience, I believe.
I can say I've experienced it multiple times in just what we're doing and what we're creating. And ours is not art, you know. I've gone through the periods where I've told Dwight, fuck it, I'm done, and and then the next day I'm back doing it again.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to have the fire, right? Like that thing, whatever you're doing, whatever you're passionate about, you've got to be so on fire for it to where you can have that day and wake up the next day and say, okay, I'm going back. I'm going back to it.
Wow. Beautifully spoken. Wow.
One thing that really stuck out to me about how you were sharing the experience of living through all of those things, the highs and the lows, is that there seems to be a great amount of wisdom that is experienced. Like there's not any kind of a great teaching that someone can hand to you. There's no way that you can just read it in a book or pick up on some hard lessons by watching others, as much as we might try. It sounds like you have had to go through some intense experiences that touched many aspects of your life. I mean, you kind of hinted at it. You mentioned that I got the impression that there was a marriage that didn't survive your transition.
Mm. Yeah, more than one actually. And and yeah, I can laugh at that now. It's not an easy thing to go through, and it really taught me a lesson. I'll tell you a story that's funny. I walked into a gallery in 2006 or seven when I first started painting, and I still know the gallerist to this day. I walked in with who was my wife then, and she goes, "Oh, you're married," and I was like, "Yeah," and she said, "That's strange," and I thought, and she didn't elaborate on it. It was just like, she just kind of like walked off, and it was like it always stuck with me, and I never understood why she said that. And years later, when I got a divorce, I was like, oh, that's what she meant. Because if you don't, I didn't understand what it meant to be an artist and what that meant for my life. And if you are not with somebody that understands what that creative pursuit is and what it means to be with an artist, it is incredibly difficult to be with somebody like that. And I didn't learn that because I didn't have the awareness and I didn't have the experience yet of what that truly meant. So I couldn't fully understand it myself. But going through that process with somebody showed me a lot about, I guess, what that path looks like when you walk it along with somebody that, if they're not in that art industry or music or, anything creative, then they can't fully understand you. Right. And even when they do, my second wife was fully understandable. She was a hairstylist. She was creative. She encouraged me to quit my full-time job. She was the one that held me to the fire. I did it. We went through that. She was with me for a lot of years in my, being a full-time artist. So she really saw the ups and downs, and she knew what she was getting into. But at the end of the day, it was still too much. It's like, because, a big part of the problem of, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a problem. A big part of the artist experience is you kind of have to live in this world where you're by yourself a lot. You're in the studio thinking creatively. And even when you leave the studio, your mind kind of stays in there. And I can be sitting at dinner after I get out of the studio, and I'm sitting across from this person and we're having a conversation, but she can tell by the look in my eye that I'm not really there, that I'm thinking about something else. And it's just inherent to who we are as creatives, that we get stuck in this creative loop almost, where you know, especially if you're in this period of really deep creation and thinking and really giving all of yourself to that that process. And when you just don't escape it, you just don't like click the light off. It's 5 o'clock, and you know, I flip the switch, and I'm now out of that. There's just that just doesn't happen. So
It was like you had a mistress.
I had a mistress. Art is a mistress. Art is maybe the most dangerous mistress there is, because you can go off and you can have sex with somebody, or you can get fulfilled emotionally or something on the outside, but it always is going to, what I've learned is it's always going to repeat itself. It's always going to be somewhat similar to every other relationship that you've ever had in some way, in some spectrum. But art is never that. Art is never the same. Art is never, because I don't think it's really separate from yourself. It really is you. And there's no getting away from yourself.
I just wrote an article that will hit the readers next week precisely about that. That when we think that it's all about our creative journey, it's not. It's about our life, because you can't separate the two.
No. And I think that a lot of people, that's where a lot of people get hung up. And I think I did for myself for a long time too, that I was externalizing that. And I was making things, I think in the beginning, and maybe for quite a while, I was doing things as, you know, for a result, right? Like if you decide to go full time, then you've got to support yourself, and then you've got to fill the galleries with work that sells, and you've got to do things that are financially responsible, I guess. Um, and I think when you create from that space, then it somehow does separate you from the work. And I think that's a slippery slope, because it starts to take away the meaning, and it starts to chip away at the specialness of it. And it wasn't really until I went through my divorce last time, which is the show that I had at Ferrari Gallery last May, that kind of explained that process. And that was maybe one of the first times that I allowed myself to be very vulnerable in that space, and make work that was so personal to me that I didn't care whether it sold or not. I didn't care. And that's a scary place to be too, because you got to pay the bills. And but I learned something from that process of being authentic and true, and really loving the work that you're creating, because I had such a fire in me last year, while I created that show, that it made me realize that that's what this is about. That's what this creation is about expressing yourself and letting all of that internal stuff shine through in the work, and not just be this really pretty thing on the wall that somebody wants to take home and, you know, and show off to their friends or whatever. I'm not against that. I'm so fortunate and so thankful that I've been able to make a living as an artist, and I still find myself having to do that. I still have to balance making work that is saleable, that is going to support this journey, but you can't let go of making the work that is really personal for you.
Yeah, I just had this feeling that the personal stuff would be the stuff that would be most desirable, because your
Mm.
soul is poured out into it. We went to a walk this last Saturday, an art walk here in Dallas, and walked into an artist's studio, and she had her art. I mean, it was everywhere. And there was only one piece in the whole room that stood out to me.
Mm.
One. And I asked her about it, and she goes, "Oh, that's a personal piece. That's something that just was something deeply that I was going through at the time." And she said I was really reluctant to even put it out and let anybody see it, because it's so personal. And I'm like thinking, okay, there's where your real art is, right there. You
Mm.
know, it's like the part that you're afraid to put out there is the part that the collectors are looking for. They want to connect to something deeper than just something pretty on the wall.
Yeah.
They want something that speaks of something the artist was going through, that created that. I mean, that one piece, nothing in there even remotely looked like that one piece. I said, "Would you sell that? Because I'm eyeing it." And she was like, "Oh, I don't know, I'm not through with it yet." Not physically through painting. She had finished it. She wasn't through with the emotional part that was connected to it. And I just wanted to say, that's where you need to go. Everything in here needs to be something that you poured as much of your soul into as that.
I hope you told her that, because that kind of outside perspective and wisdom is something that artists need to hear, because she's probably scared to go there. She's probably scared to be vulnerable. She's probably scared to touch that part of herself. And she did. And now she's maybe even reluctant to show it because it's still so deeply rooted in her, right? Um, and I think that takes artists a long time to get to that place, to be able to express not only in that way privately, but also to put it out for people to see and judge and diagnose, and like all of these, these things that make us feel uncomfortable.
I would love to ask your opinion on something, your take on this. Now, I have dabbled, I've painted a little bit, I did photography for years. I'm a creative for sure. Um, I like to cook. I bake. I can do a lot of things. Now, I'm the jack of all trades and not a master of probably any of them. I was a hairdresser, makeup artist for 40 years when I closed my business and retired. So everything I've ever done's been creative. But I'm wondering, I have this feeling as I watch artists, bona fide artists, people that make art to sell, that you can't just put your art out there. You have to put yourself out there because the art is an extension of you. And I see so many artists that they want to put their stuff out there, but they want to hide behind, a wall over there and not be seen. And then they wonder why nobody's buying their art. And this is my take, and I want to hear your take on it. But my take is the artist is buying you in on some level, just like the artist, the not the artist, the collectors. The
Yeah.
collectors are buying you in some regard, just like my clients were buying me in some part when they came and sat in my chair and let me do magic on them. Because anybody could have done that, but they came because they wanted me. And I'd love to hear how you and where are you in that? Do you put yourself out there as much as you put your art out there? Because this is a conversation that just doesn't exist right now, I don't think.
Yeah. And I think that's a great observation, and maybe one of the most important parts of being an artist and putting your work out into the world, because you are right. People do want to connect to who you are, what your story is, what's the meaning, because a lot of the times you put the work up, and that's why I like to go to openings and have openings and allow people to see the art, but then also have a chance to speak with me because maybe they have questions around it. And some artists don't like to talk about it. I think Cy Twombly famously said, people have the audacity to ask me what the painting means. And he's like, I've said everything I need to say, right? Like it's already out there. It's already on the canvas. And I respect that. I don't know if that's a shield. I don't know if that's something that maybe artists use as a way to deflect from having to be vulnerable. But I've always enjoyed, because I was an art admirer before I was an artist, right? So I got to see lots of artist talks, and I got to really meet a lot of really interesting people, and I always loved that aspect of it. So when I became a full-time artist, then it was my opportunity to kind of give that experience to other people. And I feel like that's maybe one of the only times that, I don't know, I have a lot of fun creating, but if you don't get the experience to talk to people about it and to share it and to share your story behind it, then I think you're kind of missing like half of it. You know what I mean? Like you're missing a big chunk of why you're doing this thing.
Why you're doing it, but also why they're buying it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, and a lot of times I don't even get to tell that story, right? So I have galleries that are across the US, and I send the paintings off after I'm done. They disappear out into the world, and I never know where they go. So I don't get to have any of that interaction, and I don't get to explain any of that stuff. And I think that's a really hard thing with abstract artists, is because we're not figurative, because we're not expressing something so directly that has this meaning. Like when you look at it and maybe it's a landscape or a photograph or something else, it's like, that's what that thing is. Maybe there's some underlying meanings that you have to unravel out of that. But from an abstract perspective, a lot of the times people don't know what they're looking at, and they're just putting their own 2 cents of what they're getting out of it. It makes them feel something when they walk up and stand in front of it and they buy it because it gives them a feeling. It may not be the feeling that I had, but
Well,
it's
we have the means to fix that now. You know, you can go on your YouTube channel and punch a video on and talk about the art that you're either painting or have completed, either way, and what's coming up for you and what it means for you. Or you could record a little video sharing what you were going through as you worked on this piece and put a QR code in that gallery that you ship it far away to, where they just QR code it and they see a little 2-minute video that tells them where they connect with you. There's so many ways that this could happen. I kind of, I don't have a marketing background at all, but as a hairdresser, I had to get really creative in how to get myself out there and get people to want what I offered, because I worked in a zip code that had over 200 salons times the number of hair cutters in each salon. And so I had to figure out how to be seen.
yeah,
And
that's a
and
hard.
artists are the same way, how to connect with people, uh, to let them know that you're the person that they needed to buy from or needed to work with.
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? We're so lucky right now that we have that opportunity, and that we have, all the different social medias and all the different ways that we can connect with people. It's better than it's ever been. So I do encourage artists to always utilize those channels, because it's free, number one, and you get to put that out there. As I say that, I'm not good at that. Um, I don't normally take the time I have friends that are so good at like setting their cameras up and videoing the whole process and then editing it and then blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's enough for me just to get in the studio and create the thing, right? Now that I have to do all this other stuff and all of this, behind the scenes,
But
you know,
what if you simplified and just did little 2 or 3 minute shorts that you didn't do any editing to?
yeah, I know. I'm getting a lot of feedback from friends and people and everything. They're like, you should just do this, right? Like, take advantage of it. So I'm slowly stepping into that. But I think that's why I took on galleries, because not only is there this like prestige around galleries, because that gets you into museums or like whatever, it gets you exposed to the bigger collectors, but it also takes away the need for you to go out and push that and to be seen, and it kind of gets taken care of for you in that setting. And I think that that's a big reason why I went that route, was because I can just create and I can just give it to them and then they can do it. That's not always as effective anymore as probably going out and doing some of that on your own. So
Well, and I think you create a hybrid, you could be in a gallery somewhere where they're handling all that, and you could still have a little QR code with a video that clearly connected you to your prospective collector.
yeah.
Well, I think another big piece of the art that you create, you mentioned before that you don't deal with things that are figurative. It's something that is, when I experience one of your pieces, it does a great deal for me in that I'm looking at a reflection of sorts, which there's some irony there because you're working with a medium that is naturally reflective, but I can see a true um, a true aspect of myself that is not otherwise captured. And when I experience your pieces, it's a bit of a conversation, and it's a complete sensory experience because my proprioception is suddenly challenged.
Mhm.
I have had the experience of viewing some of your paintings, and because of the experience of having my depth perception challenged, I am thrown off balance.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's something to behold. And I think, maybe that's the experience that people have being with one of your works is probably something else that should be captured and shared, because I'm telling you, just seeing the work leaves a lot on the table. There's so many things that will not come from just seeing you in the studio.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I don't often get that perspective, because I see the work differently, right? Like I'm with it every single day, and it's been 2 decades now. So you lose that kind of perspective that other people get, especially the first time that they witness it. So I'm always so appreciative to like get brought back to that point of seeing it through fresh eyes. I think what a lot of people don't, they get stuck on this dimensional movement, and they get like what I call op art, right? Like from the 70s, the optical art, meaning the illusion of art, that people put into that. And I fall into that category somewhat. And but for me, it takes it a step further from reflectivity and this kind of like dimensional movement. But what people don't really understand, because they don't get to see the process of it getting made, is I had this really powerful tool in my hand that I'm using that can take your finger off in a split second, and it's dangerous and it's loud and it's like, and I'm utilizing it in such a way, because of the way that we've developed certain aspects of the tool, that makes me, it allows me to use it like a scalpel almost, right? Like very finely, and
Or
every,
like a paintbrush.
like a paintbrush.
I
It's
mean,
like
there's literally strokes, you know, it's like you're painting with something that's scratching. It's all it's hard to describe. It
it's
has an
hard.
engraving type quality to it.
Yes. And what people don't realize, because they don't see it, is that every single line that's in that painting, it's placed very precisely, because the way that it works is an overhead light shines on a piece of metal, and when I score that piece of metal in such a way, it either reflects or it absorbs light. Okay, if you can wrap your head around that, like
Oh, absolutely.
I make the stroke on there, and it either shines light back at me or it absorbs it, and that depends on the angle at which I place that. So
And you've got that angle down now. You know exactly how to hold that tool to cut that metal in a manner where you decide, and it's probably even a continuum. It's not just reflect or absorb, it's everything in between. So there's this subtle nuance.
so you can't get stuck on, and here's where the really difficult thing is you can't get stuck on like walking up to it and being so careful, right? Because then it becomes, it doesn't have any feeling to it, because it becomes kind of scientific and almost like robotic, right? So got to
Hmm.
find this balance between knowing the angle, knowing the how hard or soft to push on it, where to leave a reflective point and then an absorbing point, because that gives you the dimensionality, right? Like the blackness or the shining. And so having to do that in such a way that, because when I create, I listen to music, right? So I'm almost like a musician in a way that is listening to the music that's going on, and I'm responding to that, and I'm putting my, like if I was a jazz player and I was putting my solo into that mix, it's capturing this movement that is very fluid, and it's very, to me, it's very musical. And that's a way for me to put on canvas. It's almost like freeze framing my action into the piece of metal, right? So I put those marks on there. I put that configuration together. It creates a composition, and basically, it is a way to kind of stamp that of this record that I just listened to, and my involvement within that, and it just kind of freezes it. But at the same time, and I know that you got something to say, when you witness that, and you witness that movement, and you experience that, and you feel that, it is literally capturing my essence onto the face of the panel, and it is left there for you to now experience and interpret however you want to.
Eric, do those strokes that you make, do they flow with the tempo of the music you're listening to?
Certainly. Yeah, like dots and strokes and this and that. It's like I'm kind of like I'm allowing that channel
You're almost dancing.
when I connect with source, and I'm kind of, that's where that's where you've really got to pay attention, is if you're not what I call in the flow state, and you're too focused on creating, or you're not focused enough on creating, there's a balance in between that, right? And if you're not in that flow state and really free with all of that, I believe it shows in the art. And when I get done with a piece that I'm really in flow state with, and everything comes together right as it should, you witness whatever that kind of like divine intervention is. Like that for me is where the magic is I get done and I'm like, I almost wasn't present for it. I almost stepped outside of myself and let everything flow through the way that it needed to. And then that's what is done. That's what gets captured.
I love that you spoke of being connected to source, because I personally believe that art and creativity in all ways is it is an element of spirituality.
Oh,
It,
100%.
you, I mean, you can't really it's like trying to separate, you know, the
It's a little,
creativity from your soul. They're one and the same. Spirituality is just it's coming. I always say I'm not the creator, I'm the messenger. It's not coming from me, it's coming through me.
we're a vessel, right? Like we're a vessel. It's
Yeah.
kind of arrogant to think that. It's funny. I had this conversation with my mentor, and he doesn't really feel this way. But I feel like we are vessels and we allow things to come through. And it's kind of arrogant in a way to think that it's coming all from me. It's all my genius. It's all, and I don't know, maybe I thought that way in the very beginning, like, oh, look what I'm doing. But it wasn't until I started to kind of experience that and step outside of myself and let that flow through, where you're like, oh, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than what my ego is, or, I just have to I have to connect, step out of the way, see that magic happen. And then you start to understand that it's not just about yourself.
I mean, you're still a genius at being the conduit, though.
Yeah, I think that's like the hard balance, right? Like it's kind of like creating the work. It's being present enough to control, but then also being free enough to let that come in the way that it needs to. And those things join together and it's like an explosion. And then after amount of time, after however many years that you do this thing, when that's taking place. Because I certainly
Yes.
make work now where I know that I'm not in that zone and it shows. And then I have to step back and I'm like, okay, you didn't do the things that you needed to do in order to connect in that way. And I've gotten better with over the years on trying to kind of navigate that and hone that and know when the right time is. A lot of people like, you got to get in the studio every day and you got to make work. And for me, I understand that idea. But for me, I know if I step into the studio on a day that I'm off mentally or, spiritually or any of these other things, maybe even physically, I know that I'm not going to get the connection and the magic that I need in order to make the work that I want. And so that for me is like, I give myself grace and permission to not enter the studio if I don't feel it.
Yeah, I think that grace and permission is important. I do have another perspective that I'd like to share with you if you're open.
Sure.
I I woke up this morning. I've got a little bit of a health condition, and I woke up this morning and I had a really rough night last night. And I have had some anxiety. I didn't feel good at all. I told Dwight I don't know if I can be present to 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 do the not interview, the conversation with Eric. He was prepared to talk to you without me. And in the last minute, I chose to come. And what I'm finding is I didn't force myself to do anything. I just showed up, and in the showing up, it, in spite of everything that was going on that I thought would prevent me from being to be fully present, it has come through me, like, because I just said, I'm just going to suit up and show up and let it unfold. And I didn't force myself, but I did say, I'm just going to see what happens. And I feel in just this hour of conversation, I feel better than I have in the last 12 hours.
I love that. And I appreciate you being, vulnerable to that. And I can certainly understand the health issue. and how hard it is to overcome that and to step in and actually show up and go through that. And you are right, because I don't want to make it sound like not showing up is the answer, because sometimes it's exactly what you need to do when you don't feel like it, in order to shift your energy or your your mindset or whatever, to get out of whatever you're in. And I suffer, so I'm a disabled vet. I had back surgery in 2019. They think that I might need it again. But I have a disc issue in my lower back that is sometimes debilitating, and it's really hard to do what I do because it's so physical. And so I battled that for a really long time, and that has a great deal of impact on how we show up as people and how we show up as like creatives, right?
Absolutely.
So I really feel that. And some days, maybe more often than not, I do have to force myself physically. That's why I kind of like paused on the physical side, because I'm like, I always have a feeling of like, oh, I could not go do this today and save my body some wear and tear, right? But you're right. I think the magic kind of shows up sometimes when you don't feel prepared or ready, and then you step into it and you get something unexpected out of it. So,
Well, and when the magic shows up, specifically right now in this conversation with you, all the things that were plaguing me and it all went away,
yeah,
you
isn't
know?
that wonderful?
And I don't, I suspect that I'm going to feel better for the rest of the day than I did before I came on the call. I'm not saying it's going to fix everything, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to feel better for the rest of the day than I did before I came on the call.
And what does
I
that
think
really
that
say, right? Yeah, what does that say?
it's it speaks to the power of community. I mean, here we are, we're doing this thing, and it's because we have a genuine interest, a focus. We're very much in tune and caring about each other. And um, I know that the condition that Maddox has, it is serious, and it's one of those things where there are days when we alter our plans because we just need to be careful. And I'm so glad that just sitting down for this conversation turned out to be just the medicine that he needed to get him in a better state.
Well, I was having a hard time missing it. From the night we met you at that gallery, I just when we meet people that I just know it's going to be an amazing conversation, and I live for that. I just live for that, and so I'm glad I pushed myself a little bit. I didn't force, but I did nudge and push myself. We're kind of running a little bit long, and I have one more question that I really want to ask, and maybe Dwight has more too, but. You spoke of your 20 years. You've been an active artist now, full time, or most of that full time,
Yeah.
and you've experienced and felt a lot of things in that 20-year creative journey. Is there anything that you've maybe felt throughout that, something that's been present that you've never said out loud?
Hmm. So a feeling that I've had through being an artist, is there anything that I have not expressed? Maybe not publicly. Privately, I've had some conversations with friends around, I think something specific maybe is, I had this with Jim Ferrari, actually, right, from Ferrari Gallery. We had this conversation in his studio, I think it was last year. And we got on the topic of family, and having a family specifically. And as I've gone through these divorces, and I haven't been successful in that area of my life, and I've been successful in most areas of my life and not that one. And I don't know, there's been some resentment around that, I think, with art, because I'm like, oh, being a creative or the art is the thing that that kind of sabotage those relationships, and it's because I'm this way. And so I held some resentment maybe around art. And it's been something that I've worked through for the past couple of years, and it's prevented me from also maybe having kids, because I know how difficult it is to not only survive as an artist, but to have enough time and energy and all of these other things that go into having children and a family. And so I think something that I haven't really talked about publicly is just that feeling of selfishness around being an artist, and admitting that to myself, because I always tried to kind of like ride that line, and I just wasn't very good at it. And I don't think that we give ourselves permission, because we get taught like, you grow up, you get a job, you have a family, you retire, and then you die, right? Like that's kind of the way that at least I was brought up. And so when I saw that structure, and then I strayed from that structure, I felt almost guilty. And then me trying to force something to work because I thought I had to was was something that I have struggled with, that I still struggle with. And there's a certain level of kind of like maybe loneliness or emptiness around not having that. But my talk with Jim, because he doesn't have kids either, and he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said it wasn't really on my heart to have children, and that like really like hit me in such a way that I had to look internally and say, okay, is that really on my heart? Is that something that I really want, or is it something that I think that I want? And I've really been debating
Think that
that.
you're supposed to want.
That I'm supposed to want. Yeah, that I give myself permission not to do those things. And I have given myself permission to not do a lot of things that I was supposed to do. But this one, for whatever reason, was just really difficult for me to swallow, whether that's biological or just from a societal standpoint. But yeah, I think that's something, that balance between creativity and I guess normalcy, if you will, because it seems to be pretty normal for people just to go down this path, but I'm just not one of those people. And that has been something that I've kind of recently allowed myself to not only acknowledge, but come to terms with, and say, I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel that way. There's a lot of people that maybe struggle with that doesn't get talked about. And so, yeah, if there's anything that I haven't really discussed before, is just my struggle with selfishness, and as it relates to creativity, and what that means.
I don't think it's selfish.
Yeah.
I think art makes a huge friggin' difference in our world. You put stuff out there that change people's lives in many ways, energetically, spiritually, in many ways. And I don't think it's selfish even a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think a lot of creatives understand that. It's everybody else that doesn't understand it, right? Like it's the people that,
And that's on them.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
on
that's
them.
on them.
That's what I've
I,
had to get to.
I'm reminded as you're sharing that feeling of not being able to have children, to follow the script, of a conversation that we had recently with someone that has made a real contribution to the restaurant scene here in Dallas. And at one point, he described how he has lots of restaurant children, thousands of restaurant children. And it's because of the way that he has poured himself into his passion and been able to see real differences in people's lives and made a real difference. And that's where he gets that fulfillment. And I think that we need to allow for there to be permission for us to see what it is that we're doing to proliferate in a way that, even though it may not look like the template that we're handed, that it's honest for who we are.
Exactly. Family is not always biological.
That's true.
You can have as many kids as you want. You can have as much family. I have a much bigger non-biological family than I do a biological family. And I'm much, in many ways, closer to my non-biological family, my family of choice, as we call it.
Yes, your community, right? Like, which is what you guys talk about on this podcast, which is community and how important that is. And I think as artists, we're often isolated, and it's important to maintain some level of like community, and it's important to have that non-biological family that you can not only lean on but talk to and communicate with. And I think I'm in the middle of all of that process, so it's taking me time to kind of get some distance to actually see that clearly. And I'm really taking a lot of steps to feel comfortable with that decision, and also letting myself be okay with it. And I think by the time that all of this is over and you have time to look back and you see that you lived authentically in the way that you truly wanted to live, that's when you gain that perspective of, okay, I did it correctly because it was who I was.
Well, and you were called to do this. It's just like the creativity flows through you, so does the choice to be a creative. I mean, you could have chosen something else, but you were called. You got a calling to be a creative, and you couldn't do anything else but that if you were going to be true to self and be happy and fulfilled.
Yeah, I tried to fight it. I tried to have the 9 to 5s. I tried to have the careers. I tried to do, all of the different things to kind of fit in and be, normal. And that just didn't, it just never fit. Right. So, and once I stepped out of that and I really became the person who I wanted to be, and I was able to express authentically, I became, I think, deep down much happier, even though I was battling all of these other things externally, because, they don't, not everybody wants you to live that way, right? They kind of want you to fit into their molds. And once I let go of some of that, then it's like, oh, I can listen to myself and
Well,
trust it.
and with you being truly happy, there's a ripple effect there. Every human being that you come in contact with, whether it's via your art or any other way, in that happiness, that ripples out to them and then out to the people that they have contact with.
I believe that, and I've seen that over the years, and that's what kind of keeps, I think, a lot of artists going, is that they see that they have an impact, and not that we can even help but create, but when it reaches other people and we get to share that, you see that it really does make a difference, and that's when you walk away and say, okay, like maybe this is this is bigger than myself, and if I continue down this road, and I have had that experience that I've actually impacted people in some ways where they have quit their jobs and gone on and created their own businesses or become artists or done whatever it is that their passion is. And they've come back later on and said, that one conversation really changed my life. And this is what I'm doing now. And to have that feedback and get to experience that, I lose sight of it sometimes. And when I see that I actually made a difference, then it makes it worth it.
Well, and we don't necessarily need to buy a piece of your art to be impacted by it. We saw that guitar one time and we're still talking about it. It definitely impacted us.
Well, that's all I can hope for. That's
Yeah.
all I can hope for.
Well, as Maddox mentioned earlier, we are running a little long, and it's about that time that we draw this to a close. And we like to do that by just asking some lighthearted, rapid fire questions.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So the first rapid fire question is 3 words that describe your creative process.
I would say passion, connection, and vulnerability.
Ooh.
Beautiful.
um, what's a dream collaboration? Any artists, dead or alive?
Wow. Wow. What's funny is I've already got to do that collaboration with my mentor, and I got that true experience. And that is something that I'm just unbelievably grateful for. But if it had to be somebody outside of that I've never met, my favorite artist is Mark Bradford. And I think I would love to stand with him in his giant studio working on a giant painting and just be part of that process. Yeah, I think that'd be my one.
Have you ever
Nice.
considered like throwing it out there on the table and seeing what happens?
You know what's funny is I throw a lot of things on the table, and so many things have come true. So maybe I should reach out to Mark after this and be like, "Hey,
Hey,
next time I'm in LA,
what have you got to lose?
what have I got to
Right.
do?" And I've done, literally has changed my life, which is why I told you I wrote that letter and I threw that out at midnight, and I never expected a response, to my mentor. And literally that one action, that one thing that I didn't understand at the time. And now if I look back at it, if I didn't do that one thing that night, none of this trajectory would have ever happened. And I probably wouldn't be having this conversation with you. So if I can say this on the podcast, if there's artists listening, like, do that one thing that you don't want to do, or you don't think you should do, or you think it's too much of a shot in the dark. If you do it and you do it enough times, I just got really lucky on my first one. If you do it, I swear your life is going to change.
Yeah, we've all heard the story about how many people that the Kentucky Fried Chicken guy had to talk to before somebody finally bought his chicken recipe.
Yeah.
And look how that ended.
Not healthily,
So,
but
My last rapid fire question. What's the most unexpected place you've found inspiration?
Heartbreak.
Mm.
I think that was the most, and I really had this kind of epiphany, not that I've not experienced that before, but, when I went through this, when I created this last show for Ferrari, and I put everything of myself into it, I was left at kind of like, when it all happened, it was just so devastating. And like, I didn't know how I was going to continue or what to do, or nothing seemed meaningful anymore. And I think that that's when I allowed myself to just kind of go to the very bottom of like the ocean and sit on the floor, right? Sit there and just really feel everything at my lowest point, and let that kind of like shower over me, and not run from it, and not try to fill it with something that's going to make me feel better. But really to allow myself to feel all of the different emotions. And when I did that, it took a little bit of time, but when I was able to come back up to the surface and actually start creating and actually started putting myself into it, I realized how important that kind of complete destruction was, and what I was able to pull out of that. And when I finished that show, which I was doing things all the way up to like the week before, and I was like, I really want to do this thing. I had this one piece, these little 4 pieces that I made that were, I don't know if you saw them in the show, but they were like these broken glass pieces, and it had my photos behind it, and I encased it in these acrylic like blocks, basically. Well, anyways, I had made some pieces like that, and they just weren't coming out well. And I was talking to Deborah at Ferrari Gallery about it, and she was like, "Well, you've got a lot of work. You don't have don't feel like you have to do this." And I was like, "I am determined. This is like the last bit of this feeling that I need to put out there." And when I finished them and I got them into the show, and I was able to stand back and look at the show in its entirety, and all the different mediums and all the different very personal, meaningful things, all of a sudden, I saw myself sitting on that ocean floor, and I tied all that together, and I said, look what heartbreak can actually do for you. And so don't run from the emotions that you really don't want to look at and you don't want to feel, because that can be really the greatest reward that you'll ever have. And I think that's part of this life process, is to experience as a human the full range of things. And we don't want to go through them, but I think that's what gives our lives meaning and interest, and that's what will produce the greatest work that you'll ever make.
oh, I fully agree. And you have just dropped a huge wisdom bomb.
Thanks.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, for the listener, I just really encourage you to like punch the, repeat button, roll it back, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and listen to that again. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys letting me share that and share all of this today. it's really meaningful for me. So I do appreciate it.
This has honestly, Eric, this conversation has exceeded my expectations.
I'm so happy about that.
Yeah.
This happens when we take the risks and put it all out there, right? I'm just thankful that you guys are doing this and connecting people and allowing people to tell their stories. It means a lot.
Well, we're really grateful for you being part of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Knew it was going to be great. I knew it'd take a long time, but I knew it was going to be great.
Yep, us too.
Okay.